Hey guys, Dave here. Thank you so much for joining. This is our first ever According to Dave podcast episode, and you're here for it. Amazing, incredible, unbelievable. It's bonkers. We made it. Hopefully not the last as well. So the idea for these podcasts, it really is a chance for me to talk a little bit more long form about life and my thoughts on it, and to just see if anyone else might be interested in that. And I look forward to hearing your guys' questions and comments that come out of listening to these. And I appreciate you being here. Essentially, I wanted to start off with kind of a focused series of podcasts on faith and Christianity and my sort of odd, tenuous relationship with that religion, and looking at different aspects of it and talking about both the things I really love and cherish and think are valuable from them, and also the things that I think are maybe a bit silly or ridiculous, and that maybe don't make any sense to me and why I struggle with it. And so, if you're interested in that kind of stuff, hopefully, you'll find something worthwhile to hear about and maybe reflect on for yourself. But before we kind of get into those topics, I actually thought, you know what, it's probably better to start with, how did I get where I am right now? How did I get here? What's my story? Because a lot of you guys won't know that. And I think this series will make a lot more sense if you get an idea of where I am and how I got here. So this first episode, maybe even the first couple episodes, depending on how long this takes, are going to be focused on me just kind of telling my story. Christian circles would call this a testimony, but testimonies, if you know anything about those, are supposed to end with someone saying, "And then I believed." So this is gonna, that's not where I am. So this is gonna be like a bad testimony, but it is a story, and it's what I've witnessed. It's my testimony. Okay, so that's what we're kind of gonna focus on. So let's get into it. I guess I just wanted to start. Just kind of grew up in a fairly agnostic house, I would say. I had a very loving family. My parents, my brother, fantastic. Well, my parents are fantastic. Just kidding, Max. I love you. No, great family life, super supportive, super loving, taught me everything I needed to know to get through life, absolutely, or something like that. But a lot of fun, a lot of laughs, a lot of love when I think of my family. And but in terms of religion, I feel like there's kind of the generation older than me. I'm in my 40s. I forget what that makes me, a millennial or something. I don't know. But my parents' generation, boomers, it seems like there's kind of at that time, growing up in the 50s and 60s, Christian was sort of like a cultural term more. It wasn't necessarily, it didn't, saying you were a Christian didn't mean what I think of when I think of that term, which is someone who sort of personally accepted, that they have, sinned against God and accepted the forgiveness of Jesus and are living a life, by the Spirit. That's what I think of. I think that maybe for that older generation, it seemed to be maybe more, if you're white and you live in North America, then you're just a Christian by default almost. So maybe we were that growing up. I don't know, but we weren't particularly religious. Didn't like go to church. Didn't really talk about the Bible or that kind of stuff. That just wasn't a part of our daily living. Tried to be good people, and certainly once I learned more about the Bible and how it informed a lot of North American values, a lot of what we learned, do unto others as you do unto yourself, or whatever the golden rule is. Those kinds of things. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Try not to murder if you can help it. All that stuff was taught to us. It just wasn't framed from a religious perspective. And then in high school, I started dating a girl who did go to church, and she had a youth group she would go to on Friday nights, and she would go to church with her family on Sundays. And I didn't really have, as I said, I didn't grow up in a house that was pro that or anti that, so I didn't really care that she did those things. But one summer, the summer between grade 12 and grade 13, I'm old enough that here in Ontario, we had grade 13 when I was in high school. So between grade 12 and grade 13, she invited me to camp, to summer camp. And that I said, great. I had grown up going to summer camps, loved camp, canoeing, hiking, mooning people. I loved camp. And I said, sure. So I went with her to this camp, and what she didn't mention to me was that it was a Christian camp. And so, we get there, and, I sign in or whatever, and it's like, okay, this is my cabin or whatever, and we're going to go meet in the main hall. Okay, we're going to probably have announcements and whatever. So I go sit there, and then all of a sudden this music starts, and people are like singing Christian hymns, and it was surreal. And, I really, tried my best to hang in there and kind of mouth the words as if I knew them. And, seeming like I knew what I was doing was nothing new for me. I'd been in high school for 4 years. So I just tried to kind of tap into that. But eventually it just sort of felt like, I don't know, like this is kind of weird, But later in the week, I started listening more to what the speaker was saying, trying to get a sense of, what was really going on here. I was starting to feel like maybe some of this was true, and that there was maybe a presence, a spiritual presence in the room. I didn't know. I was a kid. And I ended up having sort of a spiritual experience, I would say, where I felt like I encountered God. I felt like the Spirit of God was there and wanting to connect with me. And I felt that presence kind of for the first time during one of these sessions. And, looking back now, I don't know. I was young and surrounded by people who thought a certain thing. And I'm not sure, maybe I got caught up in that, and this was all just in my mind making it up. But at the time, it seemed very real to me. And so when I came back home after the week away, I was convinced, okay, this is true, this is real, and this is my identity now. And I don't really know what that means. And needless to say, that was a little bit strange going back to my house when, my parents and brother did not think these things were true. And to their credit, they supported me and did the best that they could. But also, I think we're kind of like, we let our impressionable younger son go away, and now he's come back a Christian. And, we blew that. We shouldn't have let him go to that camp. But, that's what happened. And, it was a bit strange for me going into my last year of high school. I wasn't, not like I was party man for the first 4 years of high school, but, I was doing things that regular high school kids at the time were doing. I was probably a little bit on the clean side of things anyways, but the clean side of high school is still pretty dirty, I would say. And now here I am coming back for my last year with all my friends. It's supposed to be a year to kind of celebrate and say goodbye, and, it's a send-off. And now I have this, like, faith thing that I'm trying to work out, and not knowing, was this even real? Do I even really believe this or not? And yet excited about it at the same time. And it was a tough year. So yeah, kind of strange, kind of a blend of, as I was figuring out who I was, which identity I was going to hold on to. Some weeks I would look like this, and some weeks I would look like that. And I'm sure that other people noticed that and thought that was a bit odd, or maybe even ruined some friendships for me. I don't know. But then, that was 1 year of high school, and then university hit. And I went away to Western University in London, Ontario, and it was like a fresh start for me, right? It was a chance. It was a whole bunch of new people, new situation, and I thought, I'm just gonna lay low with this whole faith thing, and I'll just be a normal person for a while here and try to fit in. And that went okay for a couple months. But then I met a couple guys on my floor who were also Christians. And when I told them I was too, we started connecting. And okay, now we're going to go to the university, on-campus Christian group, and going to find a church to go to on Sundays. And all of a sudden I got sort of, I'd say, pulled back in a way to that world, but also encouraged and excited about it too. The Christian group on campus at the university that we joined was called Campus Crusade for Christ, which at the time I just thought, okay, whatever, it's a name. Looking back now, I'm like, I'm not sure that is a great name for an organization. You're not to bring up the Crusades like in the title of your group. Not sure that's really what you want to be people to be thinking about and remembering, when you're representing your faith. I think the name had previously been Christian Inquisition for Christ, so I think it was a step up, but I think we can do better. I think actually the group has changed their name now to something, less invocative of hostility. But anyways, that was the group. And they were very big into proselytizing. We had to do, we went and did door-to-door, knock on someone's door and try to talk to them about God and about Jesus. I remember my girlfriend and I knocking on a door when I was maybe 20, 21 years old. And this woman came to the door and she had a dog. It was winter. It was freezing cold. And I remember this woman came to the door and she's struggling with this big dog to keep it inside, and she's not dressed to be outside. And my girlfriend started talking to her about going through this tract that she had or whatever. And this poor woman was trying to be so polite. And so she, instead of just slamming the door on us like everybody else did, she just kind of let the snow and the cold air into her house, and she's struggling with this dog with one arm, and she let my girlfriend talk and heard the whole spiel and then said, okay, yeah, I'm not really interested, but thank you, and was super nice and polite, even though this was not a good time for her. And I remember her closing the door and my girlfriend turning to me with a big smile on her face, kind of like, I did it, like I loved that woman by, I read the whole book to her. And me thinking to myself, wow, we are jackasses. We just ruined that woman's afternoon, and I don't ever want to do that again. That was terrible. So, I would say even early on, as I got into this thing, this faith, I still always had kind of doubts. I still had kind of an outsider perspective because I didn't grow up in it. I was kind of seeing things with fresh eyes, so things would seem ridiculous to me that people who grew up with it maybe didn't find ridiculous or didn't notice to be ridiculous at all. And that kind of kept happening. I remember I started attending my girlfriend's church, and they were a Pentecostal church in Hamilton. And it was lovely and fine, and the people were nice, and, it wasn't evil or just, I never felt judged or any of that stuff. People were good people there, but they did some weird stuff, man. Like Pentecostal church, they're doing speaking in tongues stuff. That's a big part of their theology, which I didn't know at the time. And I remember they had this really old pastor and his wife, and just this tiny little old couple, beautiful people, big smiles, And in the middle of the church service, the pastor's wife would stand up and just speak in like a booming man voice. And like, I almost started laughing, and then kind of make weird, like kind of like garbly speak. I thought she was having a stroke the first time it happened. And apparently that in the Pentecostal faith is sort of speaking in tongues. And this woman was apparently speaking for God in those moments and giving the congregation a message from God. But again, everyone there just stood like, yeah, this happens every couple Sundays. Like, what's the big deal? And to me, I was just like, oh my gosh, we need to call 911. So that kind of continued. I started to, I actually ended up breaking up with that girlfriend. And in doing so, kind of severing ties with that church. The church that we had been going to was like, almost everyone there was related to her. It was cousins and aunts and uncles, and even that old pastor couple, I think, were, great aunts or something. Everyone was kind of connected. And so I felt like, we broke up. I've got to let her have this place as a support for her. And so I'm going to have to find my own church to go to. And so one of these friends from university had started working at a church in Toronto as the youth pastor, the youth leader there. He got hired to do that. And so I went with him and started attending this church out in Toronto. And that became my home church for many, many years. And I have to say, I have a lot of great memories there. A lot of really friendly people. For someone like me whose family are not also attending, it can feel a bit lonely going to anything, but a church included, when you're kind of by yourself. And I was welcomed by what I would call at the time, at least, spiritual mothers and fathers and grandparents and cousins and brothers and sisters. And it felt like a family away from my family, and loved it. Treated really well there. I do have to say, if you are afraid in life to try things, or feel like, hey, where is there a place to safely try something out? Church for me was that. It was, I saw it all around me. I would see a teenager trying to learn how to play the drums, and 3 Sundays later, they're up in the band playing drums. This person showed gifts or aptitude in this area. Well, guess what? Come do it here. We had an annual talent show at our church where people would come and just show their talents. I remember a guy would show up and be like, yeah, I made this chair, and we'd be like, holy man, that's awesome. This guy would show up. I edited together this short film. Let's watch the short film. Nothing to do with religion or whatever, just stuff people were doing. And I really did feel like people were celebrated and encouraged at that place. And that was really cool. So, as I said, my friend became the youth leader at this church. And so I started attending the youth group as like a 22-year-old, whatever I was at the time. And I was a volunteer youth leader. And as great as church was, youth leading was even better. Really enjoyed connecting with, and I guess you could say mentoring. I feel like that's something better leaders than I did. I mainly just talked to high school students. Mentoring, that might be a little optimistic, talking about what I was doing. But I enjoyed listening to, giving time and space for young people, especially ones who probably weren't being given that time and space in the rest of their lives. Fully adjusted, perfectly social, popular kids. I didn't really have anything to offer them, but kids who were more socially marginalized, maybe kids who had a tougher home life, that kind of thing. Kids who weren't used to being valued. That was something I was good at, was valuing other people. And so I tended to hit it off with students like that. Although, I had connections with all sorts of kids, I like to think. But youth leading was great. We got to go on retreats to camps. We got to do fun activities. And then we also had time and space to really talk about life and direction. And, teenagers, it's a real time where people are figuring out where they're going, and they're starting to, they've kind of clued in that their parents aren't perfect, but they still have hope for that relationship. And so it's a really interesting and sort of fertile time to be involved in a young person's life, and to try to help them navigate it as best you can, and we weren't perfect, but we did our best. And I guess that's something. Youth work also it sort of culminated for me when the Red Green show ended in 2005, and I had been working for the show in various capacities, including writing for the show the last couple seasons. When it ended, I tried to make television work. I tried to make a new show, a cartoon called Planet Harold, based on the Harold character. Pitch that to CBC, pitch that to other places, and nobody wanted to do it. And I was a little bit sort of beaten by that. But also, so much of my time was going into my church, into my youth group, that when my friend moved on to a different church, the pastor at the church that I had been attending invited me to apply for the position of youth pastor. And all of a sudden, it felt like this opportunity to kind of do something that I loved doing, that I wanted to do, that was on my own. It wasn't something that my dad did that I was getting in on. It felt like an opportunity that I had created myself. And I just think at that point in my life, I needed that. I needed to feel like I could do this on my own. And so I took the position, and I ended up being the youth pastor at this church for maybe six years, something like that. And it was great. I mean, there was parts of it that I was really good at. Again, I think just connecting with people, that's just something that I like to do. I think I'm natural at doing that. And any part of the job that was about just being around people and talking to people and interacting with people, I was pretty good at. I'm not greatly organized or scheduled, and so there was parts of the job that were grinding to me. But I think what taking that position on really brought into focus for me as the years went on was the kind of stark difference between what I thought to be true and what sort of Christian doctrine said to be true. Anything that I disagreed with, in the Bible about or whatever, started to weigh me down, where I would think, how do I teach on hell when I don't find hell to be a moral concept? How can we have a discussion about homosexuality in the Bible when I don't have a problem with anyone being homosexual, and a God who's loving, I don't think would either. So how do I teach either side with integrity on that? And there was so much that I thought I agreed with. There was particularly about Jesus, the character of Christ, I found and still find very compelling. And we'll get into that in some later episodes. But there was enough sort of easy ground, I'd say. There was enough stuff there that I could teach on and focus on and talk about that I thought was the important stuff anyways. So, what does it matter that there's some, okay, we have some theological, difficulties, but we're majoring on Jesus here, guys. But it didn't last forever. I as part of the position, I didn't have any schooling, any religious schooling. And so one of the requirements of me being the youth pastor there was that I start attending Divinity College. And so I started attending McMaster Divinity College. And, I loved that chance to be kind of a student again and do a better job of that this time around and enjoying what I was learning about. But I have to say, attending it and learning about, how the Bible was written and what the different theories of how it was written were, and looking more closely at a lot of the Old Testament and the New Testament and the history of the church, it really, rather than making me feel better, it made me feel worse about what I was pledging my allegiance to, and called into question a number of things for me. And again, we'll get into that in later episodes. But it became obvious to me over time that I had some pretty insurmountable issues with this content. But at the same time, I was at a church that I liked. I had gotten married in the meantime, and met my wife at this church. We got married at the church, had kids dedicated at the church. Felt like we were a part of it, a part of a community, friends. We had history there. And so it felt like there was sort of more at stake than just, well, I'm having some theological issues, to leaving. And, over the months and years I ended up quitting the job. There were some pretty major issues amongst the staff team, which I'm not going to get into for legal reasons. But there were some issues, major issues. And then combining that with where I was at personally, feeling less and less authentic, kind of being like someone who should believe in this more than I do should be doing this job. And then combining that with my dad kind of came to me and said, "Hey, we have a real need for you back at SNS. There's too much work for your brother and I to do. So I'd like it if you would consider coming back." And so when I got that offer again, it felt like, okay, I've kind of gone and done my own thing for a while, I was being invited back into something that seemed like a good idea at the time, and so I took that. That was maybe January of 2013, 2014, whatever it was. And so, we kind of hung around at the church for a while through the issues. The issues continued, and eventually we just sort of stopped attending. Obviously when COVID hit, and that made that easier too, but it's still kind of weird. I still feel like we're a little bit still attached to that place, even though we haven't been there probably in 2 years now. Yeah. And so here I am. It's been 24 years since I had that night at camp as a high schooler, and I'm still trying to figure stuff out. I would say, yeah, I have some things that I love about the Christian faith that I think are worth valuing and holding on to. And I think there are some things that I can't get over. And that's been tough for me emotionally to not have peace with that. And honestly, I've talked to friends about it over the years, and they've encouraged me to, hey man, write it down. You're a writer, write a book, write that, like, get it out. And I've almost felt like in some ways I've been creatively a bit plugged, that this is like a plug in the pipes. I gotta clear this out. I gotta breathe all this out, and then there'll be room for whatever else it is that I even want to say. But it's like I can't even get there until I get this out. And I've kind of put it off because it seems difficult to talk about and difficult to think about, and life just kind of has a way of occupying you if you let it. But I'm finally at a place where I want to do it, and this podcast seems like a great way to do it. So I'm going to try my best. I'm so happy I got this. This is, we're going to be half an hour-ish here, and I kind of got it out. So that's good. The next episode won't have to be part 2 of Dave's story. Although I'll probably, you know me, this will be a pretty personal endeavor, even if I'm trying to talk about a particular subject. That's just how it's gonna go. Trying to think if I left anything out. I don't think I did. I'll probably listen back to this and think of a bunch of things, and maybe the next episode, the first few minutes will be, oh, I forgot this and this and this and this. But anyways, this was take 1. And I think we're just going to roll with it. Thank you guys for listening. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to drop them my way. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening, guys. Take care. Bye.